Hello and welcome back to another episode. Look, I hope you've had an awesome week training in whatever capacity that looks like for you, whether it's race prep mode or if it's pacer mode. I know for me personally, it's race mode. You know, I've only got a couple of weeks to get some peak conditioning in these legs, and I'm back out trying to tackle another 100-miler. But anyway, I digress. Looking at this week's episode, it's a little bit less science rich than the previous as far as going into science papers, and looking a bit more at my coaching philosophy. And where I look to answer the question that I get a lot from new clients is, how much vert should I be getting in for my particular ultra? So looking at where I start and the influencing factors around where we take things throughout a prep as well. And another question that I'm going to take a bit of a deeper look at is, are race ballots fair? Are race application processes fair? Whether that's from like an international perspective, domestic perspective, and just some of the limitations that we're up against. Are they actually working against the growth of the sport inadvertently? There's things that I want to peel back, and I'd be interested to get some feedback on this as well. And then of course I want to close out by talking all things Hard Rock 100. More course records fell for both male and female, as well as some other amazing performances that I'll also touch on as well. But to get to that very first question that I floated earlier, how much vert should you be getting in preparation for your race? I like to start with vertical density. So that's simply starting with how much vert is in your race divided by the distance. So you can do that, obviously, doesn't matter whether it's feet, meters, doesn't matter whether it's kilometers, miles. That is just a starting place for what you should be working towards in the peak of your program. So those 3 or 4 weeks before you start your taper. And the beautiful thing, or frustrating thing, depending on which way you look at it, about preparing for ultras is it's so multifaceted, right? And the uniqueness of your race isn't solved in vert alone. So if you're only looking at vert profile when you're even like selecting a race, let's say, that only tells one part of the story. It doesn't actually tell you the characteristics of that profile. Is it constantly up and down? You know, how much runnable terrain is there? How long are those runnable sections? Is it a lot of flat followed by a mountain ascent and descent? You know, how big is your quote unquote mountain? Because here in Southeast Queensland, we don't fucking have mountains. But it doesn't mean that the terrain here isn't challenging. So they're all things that you then need to start to consider. And that's not to overwhelm you, it's to make sure that you're adequately prepared. So if all you're doing is running on constant rolling hills, but in your race, there are long sustained climbs that are going to be somewhat unrunnable for the majority of us, and you aren't practicing dedicated hiking, then you're leaving a lot on the table. So this is where I start to talk to my clients about the fact that your physiology has no idea what the fuck is written in the words on your program. So all we can do is apply the stimulus to generate a certain adaptation. And we're all going to adapt to certain things differently based on our previous experience. So you need to, 1, know what your experience is. 2, how much vert is in your race. 3, what are the characteristics of that profile? And then 4, you know, how much descending is there? Is there technical aspects to it? What are the conditions that you're going to be running in? These are all things to consider. And I know it can sound overwhelming, but it's why the question of how much vert should I be getting in preparation for my race, not the only thing that's going to solve the answer to that question. And when you get an understanding of the characteristics of your race profile, it actually opens the door to so many different types of training modalities that you can include in your programming itself. So if you have some long sustained climbs, but you don't live in a mountainous area, then something like incline treadmill hiking is a really, really good substitute, because you can develop the endurance in your glutes to be able to withstand all of that climbing pressure without the need to descend. And again, you also need to develop the ability to descend repetitively. So having some sessions in there that are going to replicate the multiple descents that you may have are very, very important as well. But knowing what characteristics your race brings dictates how much specificity you can bring into your training. This, however, shouldn't then make every single session be dictated around trying to replicate race conditions, because I think it just sucks the fun out of training, to be completely honest. If all you're trying to do is replicate, you lose the finesse of feel, I believe. And during a race prep, we all know that preparing for an ultra is very, very taxing psychologically and emotionally as well, because you need to dedicate a really, really significant amount of time into preparing adequately for it. I don't think anyone enters an ultra thinking that they're just going to half-ass the training. Everyone is going to have their own level of what accomplishment looks like with respect to a finishing time, or how they handle those conditions throughout it. And ultimately, there's so many things that can work against you anyway that I think you should turn to the idea that there is actually no such thing as a perfect preparation. There's always going to be something that you can improve on. And even if you have a day of days, there's going to be little things that you can isolate in that experience that gives you confidence that you can do even better. I don't think there's too many people outside of the cream of the crop that feel like they've milked everything out of their own potential, I guess is the word that I'll be using there. The other thing I like about the vertical density approach to training is you can use it in relative terms. So it doesn't matter if I have someone who's aiming for 100 to 120 kilometer weeks, or someone who realistically with where they're at in life can only really reach peak weeks of say 70 to 80 kilometers. And I know there's going to be a camp that say, well, if that's all they can commit, maybe that they're not prepared to take that next step. And I just don't think that's the case. And again, I don't ever want someone to feel like they're not enough. I think that's a stupid way to approach it. Yes, you want to ensure that someone is going to be prepared in a way that they can compete safely, but also you don't want the barrier of entry to be so high that they never feel like they can tackle one of these things. And that self-perception is one that is very, very important when it comes to these things. And sometimes all you need is a little bit of belief from someone else. Like I have that in clients. Even when someone's just sort of reaching out to sort of test the waters, in DMs on Instagram, for example. They're like, oh, I've done this 30K race. I've done a few of these and I'm thinking maybe like a trail marathon next. And I'm like, what's stopping you from having to go at a 50? Because all you really need to do is temper your intensity and build a little bit more durability in, and you'll make it that next distance quite comfortably. But I think a lot of people have like this expectation that it has to be done at the same level of intensity or with the same vigor as some of the shorter race distances, when it never scales like that anyway. So when you can remove that guilt, because that's ultimately what it comes down to, is the guilt of not being prepared enough, then all of a sudden you don't have to have like these expectations where, I'm trying to get to 4,000 meters of vertical climbing and I'm only running like 4 days a week. So I'm just going to do this ridiculous long run on the weekend. Like, that's just going to eat into the recovery bucket so deeply that I don't think it's actually productive. And tempering back expectations and keeping things in more relative terms is going to, one, help with the recovery, breed consistency and repeatability, which then bleeds into self-confidence. And if you get through a training block that you nailed to the best of your ability based off what you made available, then everything that comes off the back of the race either tells you that, okay, well, if I want to reach X goal, whether that's a time, do I need to commit more? Am I willing to commit more? Yes or no? Like, it's a choose your own adventure type scenario as far as feedback is concerned. But I don't think that ever receiving that negative feedback is necessarily a bad thing, because at the end of the day, you don't know what you're capable of until you go out there and have a crack at it. And That's the beauty of ultra marathons. And I don't ever want to shut that door off, that inquisitive mind that someone may have, the questions of themselves that they want answered, simply because they thought they had to be training X amount enough. I don't think we can put a specific number on it, because that is all based on the expected outcome. And even that we can't define super accurately when it comes to ultra marathons. We're still not there yet. So that's sort of my long-winded take, I guess, around how much vert. You need to consider so many other things. So the other considerations, as I already said, were, what is the course profile like? How clustered are your climbs, your descents? How much vertical descending is there? Is it technical? Then you need to be looking at other avenues as far as training stimulus. So dedicated hill sessions, whether that is just treadmill alone, whether you are doing repeats, dedicated descending sessions. So developing the ability to actually run at speeds higher than you're going to be during a race, because that is going to develop your resilience and your resistance to that eccentric load. They're the adaptations that you want, because a lot of people get lost in the fact that, I just need to get stronger at climbing, because we obviously have this notion in the back of our head that if I can power hike less and at least run some runnable sections more, that's going to lead to a faster time. But sometimes we can get a little bit foolhardy in the front section of a race, push too hard on the climbs, thinking that naturally I'm going to descend. That means less effort because I'm letting gravity take hold for me. But you end up exerting yourself because you're worried about losing time on the climbs. So you're not actually getting that recovery aspect. You're just accumulating fatigue, that compounds, and then you actually end up descending way slower than you would have if you actually just climbed a bit more conservatively as well. So there's like net positives and negatives on either side to focusing only on the gain and not on the loss. So I hope that didn't confuse anyone too much, or at least it posits some questions that you should be taking into consideration about how I approach other sessions that are going to create this larger, more rounded athletic version of yourself. The next topic that I want to look at is race ballots, race entries, race applications. So many different races do it differently. The examples that I sort of just want to cherry pick, I suppose, are like Western States and Hard Rock. So for Western States, it's a yearly application process, and every year that you are unsuccessful, your ballot strength, so your votes, they double. So it will go 2, 4, 8, 16. So before you actually get a outcome that is higher than 50% likelihood, you have to have been in the ballot for 9 years. So this is why they talk about Western States as oftentimes being a once in a lifetime race for non-elite. So if you don't go and either win a golden ticket race or have like a sponsor affiliated spot or something like that, it's very, very difficult because of the amount of applications that are coming externally, internationally now, for a race that is garnering the attention that it does. Whereas Hard Rock, their eligibility goes on a 2-year cycle. So once you've qualified, you've got another full calendar year to apply again in that process. But then they also have the caveat that you need 8 hours of volunteer work before you'd be considered for entry as well. So there's a few different models. UTMB uses stones, and that's obviously like an affiliation process with all their different races that they have across the world, and that's how they sort of link up. You accumulate those, and then you don't spend the stones until you've actually signed up for that given race or become selected in that race. Blah, 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 blah. You get the picture. There's a few different things. Where I get concerned, and maybe a lot of my concerns are actually largely selfish. They're self-interested, and it isn't actually superseded to the growth of the sport itself. But I think of it from an access point of view as an Australian here. So for me to qualify for Western States, I have to run an affiliated race, which is my local 100K here, which is run every July. It's actually coming up this weekend, the Guzzler. Great race, so well organized, really, really love it. The only other race that is affiliated, to my knowledge, I believe, is the Blackall 100, which is in October, I believe. So there's only 2 affiliate races within like driving distance of where I live here in Australia to re-qualify. My issue with that is I want to be able to experience other races domestically, not just sit in my own backyard and bounce between these 2 races. And that limits my ability to then re-qualify for Western States every year. Or, if I want that diversity in my race experience domestically, I have to fly interstate for all these races, which isn't a cheap endeavor as someone who lives in Australia. It costs thousands and thousands of dollars. I've just found this out firsthand. Obviously, I've gone big early, flying all the way to the other side of the country, to Perth, to then drive down to Margaret River and race the Cape to Cape Ultra. And I just wonder if, like, domestically, we're putting a cap on the growth of the sport as a whole. One, making it seem so hard and almost pointless to even bother. But then 2, if I want the diversity to support the domestic trail running scene here in Australia, it is almost just as expensive as traveling internationally. By the time I have to factor in, bringing my family, or even if it was just my wife and like another crew member, like that's still thousands and thousands of dollars. Plus our race entries here are more expensive for 100-mile distances than internationally. So, UTMB now is in Cozzy is over $1,000 Australian. That isn't a cost to take lightly for the average Australian. And when you look at, the average ultra runner and someone who just likes to be outdoors and all that sort of thing, that I don't think that is representative of the people who are into the sport. Someone who can just constantly fork over thousands and thousands of dollars year on, year out. So, and that's not me. This then opens up another part of the conversation is I also don't think it's race directors like price gouging or anything like that. I think it just shows how expensive it is to, one, get all these permits in national parks. Obviously, you can't go overpopulating the national parks because we don't want to damage them by just piling thousands of people on these, single track courses in some respects. And we want the sustainability piece, which is also then a conflict for most people that like to be in the outdoors, is we want to make sure that it is prolonged, that it is sustainable, that we are taking care of everything out there, and that we aren't impacting the natural resources of the land negatively. But if we have to do all this to support the domestic product, to then have the opportunity, if we so wish, to race internationally, I don't know, it just seems almost impossible. And the biggest way to like shortcut some of those ballot processes is more money. So to enter Leadville 100, so the prestigious race in Colorado, is the easiest way to get into that is to sign up for their camp, which is 2 months prior. It's a 3-day camp. And they take you out on course, show you, bits of kit that are going to come in handy on certain parts of the course. Obviously, just being familiar with the course in of itself is beneficial. Getting used to altitude, which is something that as an Australian is definitely a consideration. But if that's all done 8 weeks prior, that comes with a $4,000 price tag. So that gets you the camp, your race entry guaranteed. But then it's also going to cost between $3,000 and $4,000 to fly there. What are you doing for the next 8 weeks? Are you going to stay there for another 8 weeks? I don't know. So if you do fly back, then that's another like $3,000 to $4,000 to fly there again. So all of a sudden, to expedite the time process of racing, something that I would love to experience in racing Leadville, you're looking at, probably $10,000 just to shortcut that and say like, okay, sweet, I can definitely make sure that I'm racing Leadville this calendar year. But then, like I've already said, you've got your family costs, and then there's nutrition and blah, 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 blah. Like, it's, I don't know. I don't know if I'm creating this scenario that's like making it seem unenjoyable, and that I just need to get, I don't know, fall in love more with the domestic product. But there's a part of me that is like, oh, I don't just want to race the Guzzler every year. And that's only 100K. So as far as 100 miles, that's why I'm so grateful that the Scenic Rim is presenting this race this year. You know, it's just a new experience to take on board, and hopefully, you know, we can grow that. It's such a beautiful part. I love the Scenic Rim. You know, whether it's out west or further south towards the Gold Coast, there's just so much to see. And for somewhere that, you know, isn't overly mountainous here, it's just stunning. You know, a lot of the farmland around there, and we get to run on private property. So there's still so many good parts. But the other unfortunate side is a lot of the 100 miles on offer here, close to me in Brisbane, are all run within a couple of weeks of each other. So again, then we're all even in competition on a calendar year about how we can grow each one. So I don't know. And then you sort of feel hamstrung. So it's like, well, you know, realistically, how many people are going to run a 100 mile in the middle of an Australian summer in southeast Queensland? So yeah, I don't know. I don't know if you're an Australian and you're an ultra runner, like, how do you think about this? If you're an international, what's some of your perspectives on how these races are run? Are we as Australians just a victim of a low population and high land? Because when I look at the US trail scene, when I look at the European trail scene, like, they just have the population density without the need to really travel far to be able to experience all these different races. So I don't know if we're just a victim of where we live and the lack of population to be able to drive all that. Thinking about how these events are meant to be designed here in Australia is largely set on tourism. You know, you'll see now a lot of the questionnaires when you're filling your race application out is centered around, you know, are you staying in the area? How many nights are you staying? Who are you staying with? So they're trying to collect data to be able to give back to local government to say, hey, like, this is the GDP that we're bringing into these local communities when these races are being held. So, you know, that can be a really lucrative thing for these small towns to want to get around and support the race, because they're going to get a return on having that come back year in, year out. But yeah, again, I want to get back to the point that I'm not for a second saying that the price tag that comes with these races is, you know, the directors earning a killing, because I know they certainly don't. And they're the passionate ones. They're trying to, and they really, really care about the experience that the individual gets. That was very much front of mind in all my experience over in Western Australia, and the trail running community over there is really, really strong. It's awesome to see how much they all care. The volunteers that get out and support the events, and they do an awesome job of trying to reward those that do volunteer and set incentives so that people do volunteer by giving them, you know, guaranteed entry into other races that they've got over there. You've also then got to build in, you know, shorter events to try and get, you know, the 100 miler, the 100Ks, whatever it is. The peak distance event is best set on the same day rather than trying to make a different event itself. Because obviously you got all the permits there. You want to be driving the interest around people that are running the shorter distance. Once they complete it, see the other people out there running the longer ones. It drives that sense of community and gets you asking that question rather than trying to separate it. Then obviously it creates the density for the people traveling and all that sort of stuff. So I see the model. I'm just not sure how it goes at scale and what that looks like for the longevity of the sport in Australia, where the interest continues to, you know, get you racing domestically so that you can race internationally. And whether that is just going over to Tarawera, you know, over to New Zealand and racing there and all those sorts of things. But yeah, I'm definitely going to get some race directors on the podcast. I'm interested to hear firsthand their experiences. What are the true setbacks that we as average punters don't take into consideration and just don't know because it's not our wheelhouse to really be concerned about that sort of thing. So, yeah, that's some of my, I guess, introspective thoughts around the issue. As always, I'm interested to hear what you've got to say about it, what your experiences are, how you think the sport can continue to grow, what are the best next steps for Australian trail running. Do things need to change? Do there need to be certain considerations given to Australians? Is that fair? I don't know. I don't know the answer to all these, but it does get you scratching your head. It does get you thinking a little bit deeper about what this all means. Is there a need for a global trail running community? Is it best served to look after yourself in a smaller community and try and grow it out from there? I don't know. But one thing I really hope changes is that accessibility, or at least I don't ever want someone to feel like they can't shoot for the stars based off finances. And yes, everything costs money, and I'm not saying this stuff should be free, but it seems a damn sight harder to get to the other side of the world to be able to train there, to compete there. And maybe we need to do a better job here at enticing people to come from the US and Europe. I mean, we saw Caleb Olsen, the winner of Western States, run the GPT 100 mile down in Victoria. I believe it was last year, maybe the year before. So yeah, it's possible. Like they will come out. So I don't know how we do it as an international community. Maybe the fact that UTMB is part of the Australian trail running community in Katoomba and stuff now, Cozzy. Maybe the prospects of the sport growing are in greater hands. Whether you do or don't like UTMB is another question. But yeah, I'll endeavour to get some race directors on and start to explore that question a little deeper and see if we can, I don't know, come up with some ways that we can actually more actively help support trail running in Australia and make sure that it grows in a way that doesn't then just stockpile a single race or a single couple of races, because I don't want to see that either, where, UTA just becomes the only race worth doing as far as 100 mile in Australia, because I want options. I don't just want to have to go to Katoomba to race 100 mile, but that also then qualifies me for other races should I want to try and go international. I want the other domestic areas to be able to be in a position where they can promote international races as well. So yeah, all will be revealed. I'll continue digging around and see what we can come up with. But lastly, as I alluded to at the start of the episode, Hard Rock 100, so crazy. Course records broken. So Ludovic Pomeray, he broke his previous course record, so he's now won 3 years in a row, Hard Rock 100 mile winner, and broke his previous course record of 21 hours, 33 minutes down to 21 hours and 11 minutes. So knocked 22 minutes off his previous course record. And what's amazing about that is each year they alternate clockwise and counterclockwise. So to knock that amount of time off running the course in an opposite direction is a massive feat, because the queen of female ultra, Courtney Dauwalter, breaks her own clockwise record by 8 minutes. So she ran a 26 hour 11, but it did not supersede Katie Scheide's counterclockwise time last year of 25 hours, 50 minutes. And again, I know that those times seem significant when you're talking about like 20, 21 minutes, but the difference there is, like, the difference in Courtney's previous record is 5 seconds per kilometre or 8 seconds per mile. Like, anyone who is even just a casual runner knows that is such a small difference. but what that looks like at scale, right? I think it's just a perfect example of what scale looks like in ultra running. And I guess it poses the questions now is like, what's next for these guys? What does Courtney do next year? What does Pomeré do? He's done it 3 times in a row now. He's almost 51, which I think is the fucking coolest part of that story. It just goes to show that, you know, ultra marathons are largely based on training experience. And I still think it's why the majority of the elites are peaking in their late 30s as opposed to early 30s in like road marathons. So, you know, the fact that he's drawing that out even further into 50 and dominating and setting course records at 50, like that excites me personally. You know, like I'm in my mid 30s, and to think that I can still be pushing certain limits for another 15 years, it's hugely motivating. It's so satisfying, and it also gives you pause, you know, reflecting back on what I've just been talking about, getting to these races that, you know, perhaps everything doesn't have to happen tomorrow. You know, like I can still go and have the experience that I'm looking for, because, you know, I'm never going to win these fucking races. It's literally about experiencing new parts of the world and taking in what that race community does for that individual race itself, and how that differs, and what I do like, what I don't like, how can it be improved, and all those sorts of things. Yeah, I think it's so cool to have examples constantly where, you know, the age barrier is constantly being pushed back. But the one result that I wanted to talk about was Tara Dower. So she came third in females after 2 weeks prior finishing 6th at Western States. Like, I just really like the character that Tara puts out. She is definitely a tough individual when it comes to not only like the psychological, I guess, willpower that she possesses to push, but then also how she matches that to running to her physical limit. I don't think I've ever really seen her finish a race where it doesn't feel like there's nothing left to give. Like, she always finishes so strong. There's always that emotional outburst from her. I think it's just really cool to see that authentic side. I'm sure there's thousands of you guys out there that, you know, could tell your own story about your own ultra races and how you get that overwhelming feeling when the race end is there, or when the race unexpectedly is thrust upon you, and the emotions that do burst out. It's insane how much, I guess, like life experience can be condensed into something so small. So even though in relative terms ultra marathons are such long races, when compared to how long your life is, what percentage of your life that individual race is, it's such a minute thing. But what it does to your experience, it's not necessarily like life-changing, I would say, but it definitely leaves a mark on you. They definitely create core memories. And I think there's something really unique about an ultramarathon's ability to bring that about in such a compressed time relative to how much time we have been alive for. And Tara does such a great job at representing herself, her sport, being a pin-up role model for not only female athletes, but just athletes in general. You know, I look to model so much of what she brings to the table, and that's just your best each and every week, and trying to build upon that. The fact that she was able to still put together, I think it was like a 40K week after Western States. So I think she had 2 days off and then was straight back into things again. To do that and to podium at such a tough race. I'll stand corrected, but I believe Hard Rock reaches altitudes of 12,000 feet, which is just mind-boggling as an Australian to be able to run at those sort of heights is... Oh man, I think running in general is hard, but I've got it easiest of all living at sea level. Like, it's insanity. So yeah, I mean, I can't wait to see what she's got next and what her general thoughts are about what lays ahead for her and how she's going to approach that. I mean, it's quite evident that she does have that dogged personality within herself to push. But, you know, what sort of edges or limitations does she feel are still left untapped from a performance perspective that ultimately need to be informed by how she trains? So she knows she's got the mental toughness to push when things get hard, but what are perhaps the things that she needs to finesse that aren't based on effort alone that are actually going to shift the needle of performance? So that's what I'm excited to see come 2027 for Tara Darrell. I think that's about all I've got for you today, guys. As I said, if there's ever any questions that you have around training, coaching, obviously I'm always more than open to going back and forth with you, either through Instagram, or if you do want to email me direct, benny@doseofbenny.com is where you can find me there from an email front. Otherwise, have a wonderful week. As I said at the top of the episode, whatever it is that you're working towards, I hope it's going well. And even if it's not, shout out to me. Let me know what's going on. I'm always interested to see what you guys are working towards and how I can be of any service, and how the rest of the community that I'm looking to garner off the back of the podcast and my socials and all that sort of stuff can look to serve you as well. All right. Until the next one. Catch ya.